Hello and welcome to Star Piece. I guess this is the 5th edition, part of the GOCast podcast, where we get to know your favorite personalities and leaders in the world of Pokemon Go / Pokemon in general, I suppose, a little bit better. I'm your host, Chris, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Lachlan.
How are you going today, Chris?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. Lachlan, how are you?
Look, it's a good day for us. It's the week before Christmas, so Australia's starting to melt. The cyclone's up north, and weather's a little bit chaotic. But, you know, that's just Christmas time down here.
Great. I'm still just not used to that. I understand that that's exactly how the world works and how hemispheres work. But in my mind, it's Christmas time. I'm pulling out the snow pants. I'm running out into the nearest retention pond because that's what we have to do for snow slopes out here in Illinois, and not having a good time because I'm too old for that now. I hurt myself.
Well, and if people are watching the video version of the podcast, you might be wondering, oh, Lachlan's in a different space. It's because my normal recording booth doesn't have air conditioner in it, so I'm sitting under an air conditioner right now. So apologies for not having Pokemon things in the backdrop today. You just have the beach.
We're aware. You like Pokemon. We're all on the same page. It's fine. Well, I mean, hey, this is an interview show. So who are we interviewing? Well, we would like to welcome to Star Piece Archaic from Bulbagarden. They are the webmaster of Bulbagarden Network. And for those of you that are listeners of GOCast proper, if you're wondering where we source all of our Pokedex entries and such for Pokelore, it is from the Bulbagarden description. You would know that if you clicked on the link in the show notes. But if you haven't yet, that's where we get it from because it's like the most organized place on the internet to get it from. So welcome, Archaic. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Like Lachlan, I've got my air conditioner on. It's about 38 degrees Celsius here today. So, I've got no idea what that is in freedom units. But,
38, you said 38 degrees Celsius?
Something like that, yeah.
That's 100 degrees in Fahrenheit. That's insane.
Yeah, that's a mild summer.
That's a mild Christmas.
It's not a dry heat though, right? It's sticky. It's
a humid heat.
It'd be a humid heat at the moment. Yeah, we've had a lot of rain, a lot of storms over the past few days.
Yeah. Well, sorry to hear that, but happy to hear that you're somewhere with aircon because that's great. Well, I'm really eager to dig into this interview because of how steadfast your website has been as a resource. And so it's kind of nice to put, so to speak, a face to the name, right? Or the presence. So why don't we just kind of get started here with something pretty expected, I suppose. What is Bulbagarden sort of in general? I understand Bulbapedia is just a part of it, but what is Bulbagarden and what is your role with it? What does Webmaster mean?
So, I mean, Bulbagarden has always aimed to be, I guess, a generalist website for Pokemon. So covering all aspects of the franchise to the best of our ability. Not necessarily specializing in any particular area. As Webmaster, I mean, that's a pretty old title these days, but basically the head honcho, the owner. The buck stops with me. Doesn't mean I do everything on the website. I mean, we've got over 100 volunteers involved with the site at the moment. I mean, right now I do some of our Twitch streaming. I do a lot of editing on the news side and publishing articles there, as well as a bunch of back-end things together with our technical team. So, I mean, as far as Bulbapedia editing goes, for instance, I can't really claim much responsibility there. That's mostly coming from the volunteer staff and users.
That is the sign of a good leader right there. It's like, well, it's not really me. I just help the people that do it get it done. Like that's good. That's good. So it's sort of like a generalist website. What is your like target demographic? Is it just the general Pokemon fan? Is it somebody trying to find forums to hang out in? Is it for resources? Is it for database services? Or is it all of those sorts of things? If you had to like sort of, I guess, detail a bit more.
It's pretty much all of those things. Like,
Okay.
our tagline is like the original Pokemon community. We are like, of all the Pokemon websites still around, we are probably the one with the oldest history at this point. Like, there was a bit of a break where the website didn't exist, but we came back. And I mean, a bit of a long story there, but if you'll give me a moment.
Please.
Bulbagarden originally started as bulbagarden.com in the late 90s. The webmaster at the time was a person named Chris Kalecki, who some people may recognize as a now former game designer for Blizzard, who was working on World of Warcraft for quite a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
Back to in the golden years of that game too, huh?
Yeah. So Chris was running it up till about 2000. Then it crashed in the .com crash, basically. The advertising revenues simply weren't enough to keep the website afloat, and it went down. At the time, I was the head admin on the forums, so basically his right hand. I spent a while working on other Pokemon sites that were around at the time, so the Pokemasters, TPM, the Universal Pokemon Network, which itself was a resurrection of Ultimate Pokemon Network under a different crew. And finally, I ended up actually, of all places, on Cerebi.net, where I was Cerebi's right hand for a period of time. And we had a rather significant number of disagreements about certain things. And when his site ended up suffering a substantial period of downtime, and having seen all these other major Pokemon sites going down at the time, like the online community at the time was really in shambles, I made a resolution to try and bring back Bulbagarden, and lo and behold, Chris Kalecki turned up on MSN Messenger out of nowhere. No one had seen him in
the good old
months.
MSN days.
Yep. No one had seen him in months, if not a year, and he just turned up one day, and I'm like, hey, I'd like to bring the site back. Would you let me do it? And yeah, he basically signed it all over to me, and we brought it back. And I mean, it was basically just a forums for a while, and then so Bulbapedia was actually. So Chris had originally had an idea for a wiki-based site, not specifically for Pokemon. He had this idea of a general anime gaming entertainment site that he called Anega, which was supposed to be wiki-based. He was using TikiWiki for it. But we had the idea, well, we could do a wiki-style thing for Pokemon. And we got our opportunity when the website Pokemon Forever, which was run by Meowth346, he wanted to basically retire, and his site had the best Pokedex of the time. And he was basically like, look, you can have my Pokedex. And that basically became the foundational information for Bulbapedia.
And I'm sure a lot of our listeners use Bulbapedia on a near day-by-day basis. Just because when new Pokemon are coming out to Pokemon Go, the first thing players who are Pokemon Go originators, where that was their first game, they'll Google the Pokemon. So having all of this information and all this database about the history of Pokemon just at our fingertips, and it's so accessible, so reader friendly because of that wiki format, and having players just the option to learn about these Pokemon, fall in love with them before they catch them in the real world. And I think a lot of people didn't understand like the origins of the website. It's a case of there's probably a large amount of listeners in the car with their parents right now thinking, what was the .com crash, Mum and Dad? And they get to have a lovely conversation about the .com crash after this.
Yeah, I think it's awfully remarkable. You were walking through that, like the story of the website is largely also like it rides the cultural wave of the internet rather closely. And I didn't really consider that because it wasn't until after that I started like working on other websites and making content and things like that. That never really occurred to me, but that makes so much sense when you lay it out like that. So yeah, what an impact that had directly to what you were working on. That's crazy.
It's been a ride. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, we have volunteer staff members on the website today who weren't born when I first started running the site, and that's that's.
Like that gif of Matt Damon like aging 40 years. It just
Yeah, well, I'm almost there.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So, with the Pokemon franchise, what is your origin point into it? What was your first game? What was your first starter Pokemon? And what made you fall in love with it?
What my origin point was the anime, not the games. I've always been a huge fan of the anime. I think we even had the Pokemon anime in Australia before the games got released, if I recall correctly. The Pokemon would have been Pokemon Blue. I believe that was the first game I actually purchased for myself with my own money as I guess I would have been a young teen at the time. And of course my starter was Bulbasaur.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, sure.
No, it was. I mean,
full circle.
Yeah.
I would have originally picked Squirtle in my first playthrough of Gen 1, but all subsequent playthroughs I've gone Bulbasaur. Absolutely fallen in love with the Bulbasaur.
Charmander, I'm sorry to say, folks.
Heresy.
I mean, Bulbasaur's number one in the decks in that generation, so it just makes sense. Like you start from square one, more or less. And Bulbasaur's cute to boot, so
yes,
Bulbasaur was my Pokemon Go starter as well.
There we go. Exactly right. Yeah. So did you continue on from there? Did you do the second generation games? Was there a point where you took a break? Because I feel like people that really liked Generation 1 and 2, like they got around 3 and 4, and then more often than not, especially the people that came back with like a fervor, everybody seemed to have like a little break, with a couple of exceptions. Looking at you, Lachlan.
Yeah, I have never had a break.
Okay.
I guess the closest I had to a break was the fact that I got Ultra Moon very late. But that just came down. Well, I was doing a PhD at the time, folks.
You had your hands full.
Yeah,
Understood.
So should we be saying Dr. Bulbasaur?
Ooh, here we go. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, let's just put it this way. In Australia, you don't call every academic a professor. But yeah, if I was in America, I'd be calling myself the Pokemon professor.
Absolutely.
Over here, it's like to get to associate professor or something is a much higher rank. We've got to go through lecturer and senior lecturer first.
Yeah, we just kind of give out titles and things willy-nilly here. If you're close enough, that's fine. Nobody's going to give you any garbage for it.
As it is, I need to renew my old professor qualifications for the TCG. I used to have those, but
and while you're at it, do the Pokemon Go credits as well, so that when they launch it in Australia, we actually have someone up north that the card house can call on. But
I mean, to be fair, like given how the last two Pokemon regionals have gone for me, maybe I would be better off assisting on that side rather than trying to play again.
Well, I've kind of been that bad. You had a better win-loss rate than I did, though it was a different game that we were playing. But still, you had a better win-loss rate than me.
But I mean, like, it's a far cry from how it used to be in the old days. Like, so a bit of context here. I basically spent 15 years not playing competitive because I was doing all my post-grad studies, etc., etc. So I've only gotten back into competitive play over the last 2 years, and both years I've had very horrible results.
Oh no.
But if we go back to when I was originally in competitive TCG, I did 5 tournaments and made top cut in all of them, and won 2 of them.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, but I mean, to be fair, like winning a city championships or a regionals back in the day was not quite the same here in Australia, because your regional championship was basically everyone who was in the one league in that city, plus a few people who decided to come from out of town.
So it's like the same people that you saw like every week at the card shop. Yeah, and you're just like, this is just higher stakes, but the same folks.
Whereas now there was a lot of that flew in internationally for the because of the changes Pokemon Company International has made with the Asia Pacific region. It's not just Pokemon Go that only has 3 regionals. It's the TCG and the VGC as well. New Zealand has nothing. All of the other islands have nothing. So there's a lot of people in the surrounding area who will fly into all 3 of these regionals.
Yeah. But not only just the surrounding area, also people from the US and so forth. And I mean, I've got a lot to say about that.
Taking our championship points.
We like to insert ourselves pretty much anywhere else that we just choose to go to. Like, oh, this happened in Australia. That's all right. That I deserve to be there. I'll be there too, right? But point of speaking of Americans, point of ignorance here. Question, please. If I was trying to get from New Zealand to mainland Australia, how long would that take me to do? Like, let's just say I'm flying. Is it like an hour flight? Longer than that?
It would take less time than going from one part of Australia to the other.
Okay.
Brisbane to Perth is a longer flight.
Yeah, Brisbane to Perth is a longer flight. Brisbane to Melbourne might be about similar.
Okay.
So about 2.5 to 3 hours, depending on turbulence.
Yeah, it's so weird. And you look at the map and you try to like figure it out, and you're like, oh, the visual representation of this is all wonky anyway, so I really have no idea, right? Like, that's pretty wild. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Australia needs more recognition, and you need more regionals for sure. And then the idea of people coming in from out of country would not dilute it as much if there was more surface area of opportunity for people in Australia.
Yeah, I mean, I think this speaks to a broader problem that the Pokemon competitive scene has, in that it can how to put this in a more diplomatic way. When you think about it, there's a lot of privilege involved in it. Like, you look at the competitors in Masters, and even in lower divisions, actually, and you see all these people coming from, say, the US to Australia, and you're like, okay, so you were able to afford to come here, and maybe you brought your kids with you as well.
For a weekend.
So, but, I mean, you would have had to get here a day or 2 beforehand. So you got to have the time off work, and you could afford to do this just casually to satisfy your hobbies, with no guarantee that you're going to get the money back from a win, and many of you won't do it. So there's a lot of very rich people who are going and collecting a lot of championship points, potentially just from attending a lot of tournaments. And then you've got here in Australia, where I can go to 1 tournament a year because I'm not in a position to just casually fly over to Perth or Melbourne.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And the thing with those championship points is you earn them in your own country. So Fish from the team, mentioned a couple times that he's going to be in Europe early next year, and is looking at the European regionals and thinking, oh, look, if I can go to one of these and I get some championship points there, I can then add it to championship points earned in Australia to then qualify.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because for Go, the winner gets 200 championship points and an invitation to Worlds. You need 300 championship points to get to Worlds otherwise. Second place gets 150 championship points. So if the math works out perfectly, we can get 8 people for Go. That's without anyone going overseas. But there are people coming in from international, as even for Go. That we had someone from the UK in our Brisbane bracket.
It is frustrating. So it would make sense for Australian folks to seek other opportunities elsewhere, just because there's so few in Australia. But like,
they're so expensive.
It's true. I understand that. But an American coming over, it's not like there isn't 8 opportunities here annually to get your points in. That's what.
And you have the international championship as well. Like you still have the NAIC.
It's going to be at
whereas
New
they took that
Orleans
away from us.
Yeah, they did.
I'm still salty about that.
I can't help but think that maybe the solution for Australia is the same solution that we had in soccer, which is to go to the Asian Confederation. Let's be under TPC instead of TPCI.
I mean, that would probably, I think that would probably make quite the difference.
I mean, it'd be completely different, but they'd have to, we'd be completely desynced with the US releases of cards if that happened, presumably. So,
just give us the sets early. It's fine.
Is that worth the trade-off, do you think? Which do you think is the lesser of two evils? There's like more opportunity potentially and more support, or being out of sync with the cards?
I mean, I'm pretty sure. No, there is one country, I think, which is under TPC but gets the cards from TPCI, which is the Philippines, which gets English cards from the US. So I think you could do that sort of arrangement here in Australia as well. So we'd still end up with the same cards. And I guess I'd have to look at the rules. Are you allowed to use Japanese cards under TPC if they're not otherwise released in your area? You might be.
Maybe with the translation.
Yeah. I'd have to look into it.
That's for a future thing, but that's some good theory crafting, and you could use Nintendo Australia, who's based out of Victoria, to sort of just have someone in an office just once a month check their emails to see if there's any updates on what they have to do from Japan. Yeah. Like it is surprisingly a low impact role that they would have, but we always get stuffed around down in the future, so just put on the long list. Hey, at least we're not New Zealand. At least we get some regionals.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
But I mean, I can't see Australia getting Worlds or a Pokemon Center or anything like that until, I don't know, we get a region based on Australia. That's past time we had that.
If we get a Pokemon Go live event.
Well, we might get the Pokemon Center then, but
we will have at least a pop-up Pokemon Center. That's what we can dream for.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
but we could probably talk about this all day, honestly, because this stuff is infinitely fascinating to me, from my perspective, because it's just like, first of all, I have like half a toe in the competitive scene. One of the reasons why we have a separate show also on the feed called PvP Corner, because me and my regular co-host on GOCast proper just don't do PvP all that much. And so like the global perspective, especially even in just Go, let alone VGC and TCG and Unite, right, is pretty chaotic. A lot of nuance, So we could probably talk. I could ask you questions about this all day, but I kind of want to keep talking about Bulba Garden, because we've got a couple of other questions here. I mean, we started talking about this a little bit, about like with the origin story of Bulba Garden and how it is here today in this iteration, and how you're webmaster and all that. But I'm kind of curious why Bulba Garden? Like, what about it is something that motivates you and inspires you to like staying engaged with it and committed to it? You mentioned that you have a large team that you work with too. So what's going on there? Do you have a mission statement or something like that?
The vision statement is as corny as you'd expect, to be the very best, like no one ever was.
All right.
To provide users with a safe and inclusive place to connect with each other, discuss all things Pokemon, to celebrate the diversity of the Pokemon community. We can give everyone a place, an opportunity to contribute to the growth and development of the community and as individuals.
Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds great. And so how do you feel Bulba Garden has sort of like embodied that and empowered, those sorts of goals?
I mean, we try to not be a site that is one person. Like, there's been a history in the Pokemon fandom going back a long time, for at least amongst the big name sites, for there to be essentially one figurehead who everyone knows, and that a lot of the little guys behind the scenes don't get noticed. We've, from the very beginning, tried to be quite different to that. It's like, yes, I'm here at the top, but we've got all these other staff members who deserve recognition for their contributions. We've got all these just regular users who are contributing to things like Bulbapedia, or even like a few people who've just written news articles for us as community contributions and sent them in. Like, people have the opportunity to that. They get the full tagline, acknowledged that, like, yes, they're the author of this piece and so forth. And we want people to be able to do that. Like with our Twitch and YouTube, a lot of the stuff we're doing there is intended to try and help, say, small creators who may only just be getting on their feet to have a platform where they could come to. So, I mean, we've only been able to do this with a relatively small number of people to date, but like the idea with, in particular, the Twitch is we would have someone who maybe they don't have a channel yet, but they want to start streaming. So they can start streaming on us in an empty time slot. They could get assistance from us in like, look, here's how we've got everything set up on here. So we can teach you how to use OBS, do all this stuff. And they can use that to establish their own personal brand. And then if they choose to go off and leave at some point and establish their own channel and do other things, they absolutely can do that.
That's fascinating sort of model. It's like a very altruistic sort of way of empowering the community. So how has that gone? I can imagine that there is a lot of opportunity for that sort of openness to sort of like have its own challenges or difficulties, but also like,
I
the
mean,
opportunity
I'll
for
fully acknowledge that it hasn't gone as well as we'd like in all instances.
sure, of course.
Like the Twitch side of things, for instance, like we've only really had one person who's gone off to do other stuff so far, and that person has, I mean, they're still with us, but they do their non-Pokemon stuff on another channel. Part of the problem for that has more just been about getting some of these smaller creators recruited, because it's like you can't. I mean, to recruit someone who doesn't yet have a channel is obviously very dangerous.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah, exactly. So it tends to be, oh well, you've got to go for a small creator who might already be starting to establish themselves, and then like, are they actually going to be interested in that? And we've had some much bigger successes in the past with other areas, like on the news side. Our former editor-in-chief for news, like quite a long time ago now, but they now work for Pokemon as an editor, and they've been credited on a number of pieces. Another former news staff member, freelancers for a number of different companies now writing news. Like they've done articles for Crunchyroll and so forth, so they're very active in that kind of geeky space.
Cool.
I mean, they're probably the two biggest success stories from there. But yeah,
That's
like
fast. It's very cool. Yeah.
I mean, it's the kind of thing we want to do more. Like one of the other projects we've kind of been doing on and off for the past few years has been there's a number of academics who are publishing papers that have to do with the Pokemon franchise in some way. Like there was one a few years back where they were publishing a paper about climate change with this hypothetical scenario, which was basically the impacts on Kangaskhan in Australia. Yeah,
that's amazing. That is amazing. I love that.
And
That's
they published it. They published it under an open access license, so we were able to republish it on Bulba.
Mhm.
And I mean, for a time, the Google Scholar listings for that paper went to our version of it instead of the version of it in the academic journal. So that was fun. So like this is the kind of thing we want to be able to do more. We want to be able to help promote various aspects of the community to give people a home. I mean, one thing we've done recently is the team behind Corsola Cove have come on with Bulba Garden. So they are a bunch of people who used to be with Smogan and Stunfisk, who are basically content and meme creators. So we're giving them a home and some support. There's another community which is going to become part of Bulba sometime early next year after we finally finish some of the stuff with the Bulbapedia back-end upgrades. So we're looking forward to that. And that was a community that was potentially going... I mean, earlier this year, they were concerned that they were literally going to vanish off the face of the earth because it looked like their host might have been going belly up.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
I mean, been there, seen what that's like for the fandom, more than happy to help people who are having that sort of problem.
Yeah.
We did actually make a similar offer to the Sylph Road, which they decided not to accept. But, I mean, they had their own plans at that time, so that was fine.
Oh yeah, that was a whole situation. They were pretty public about a good portion of that whole rise fall acquisition where we're done sort of thing, right? Like it. Yeah, it was as soon as you were describing this, that's exactly what I thought of. And now I know it's because Go is my focus, right? Personally, as a Pokemon fan, but yeah.
Yeah, it's I mean, Go as a whole, looking at how it impacted on the Pokemon fandom online, to me is quite interesting. Like before it came out, I think it's safe to say that most of the large communities didn't think much of it. They were like, this is not going to be popular amongst the real Pokemon fans, so why should we care about this? And then it came out and it was huge, and it's like, oh yeah, but like it's just going to be a fad. It's not going to be that big in 6 months' time.
Yeah.
7 years later.
Yeah. And I think it's safe to say that a lot of the large communities, ourselves included, did not move quick enough on Go. But because we didn't, a lot of Go specialized communities popped up that have really covered the game in incredible detail.
Yeah.
And I mean, to be fair to them, there's quite a few of them that do things that Bulba in general tends to be fairly uncomfortable with doing. Things like data mining stuff, for instance. That's always been a bit of a for us, because we know how easily the big Pokemon sites could get taken down by Nintendo and the Pokemon Company if they didn't like something we were doing. And that's always been one of those areas where it's like, I mean, having the plausible deniability of not putting the info up until it's actually officially announced or in the games is
But there's always the argument of what's
Yeah.
in the game. Is it when it's released into the game, or when it's made available into the game, or when people are able to find it in the game? Because we've seen
yes,
this
exactly
last
that.
week with the Scarlet Violet final pass of the DLC, the teal, not the teal mask. We had the teal
Indigo
mask.
disc.
This is the Indigo disc, which is all part of the Hidden Treasures of Area Zero. There we go. Had to shut my eyes.
Oh my goodness! Wow, look at that. He got the whole
So-
marquee.
After finishing the storyline of that whole process, and because I did it on release day, there wasn't these online sources, so I didn't see any of the spoilers or the leaks. The only thing I'd seen is what was in the trailers, and that experience is so special. So I can understand why the Pokemon Company would do their best to try and preserve it. I've now unfortunately seen the content
don't
for
spoil
the
me,
unreleased.
please.
I've seen
yep.
how the content for an unreleased Pokemon through other sources, and a website you mentioned earlier has actually put up that particular Pokemon stats and information. But the way the storyline progresses it's just so special. And as we're recording it, it's 3 days old. I know Chris probably hasn't even finished it yet, and you're definitely not done with it yet. Okay, so I'm not going to say it because the normal 2 weeks before you spoil anything, but it's just such a special feeling to be able to go around and explore, and that's something that I understand the Pokemon Company holding dear to their chest. And Niantic, on a few occasions, has openly had employees say how frustrated they are with things getting discovered early, like when Meltan was released through Pokemon Go, for example.
And this is kind of a huge change from the Pokemon fandom, how it was in the old days, of course, because now that we have these global simultaneous releases of things, this kind of leak becomes way more significant than it was back in the day when you expected Japan to have things 6 months or more before we got it in the West. And so, of course, we'd know everything before the official release date because we would have literally played it in Japanese, bought all the Japanese official guidebooks and got all of that info up onto Bulbapedia before launch day.
A Prima guide, yeah.
Oh, not a Prima guide. The Japanese guide's so much better.
Oh yeah, no, I just I grew up here, so that's what I had and that's what I worked with. Whatever was on Barnes and Noble's shelves,
But yeah, like Prima guides and thinking about those things, for us, that was actually a fairly significant concern for us back in the day.
Sure.
And was part of the reason why early on we didn't necessarily have walkthroughs of these games as like premiere content of anything, simply because we were concerned that if Prima felt that basically we were cutting into their profits and made big complaints to Nintendo and the Pokemon Company, would they step in and be going, look, like, don't do this?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, nowadays it's not as big of a concern. I mean, Prima still technically exists, but they're not really making game guides anymore, and you don't actually see all that many game guides these days.
No, they all live online now,
Digital game guides, and I'm like, look, that's just what we don't. Why are we paying for this now?
Yeah, like walkthroughs, like especially like let's just take for instance, right? Like when I was younger, playing Red and Blue, and I wanted to get through Mount Moon, and I wanted to do it in the dark because I couldn't be bothered to put flash on anybody at the time because I was too young to appreciate what I was trying to do, right? And I would just follow those guides and just flip page to page to page. Nowadays, if that was happening, just pull up a YouTube video and follow that. Like it's just same stuff, different place, different medium. And what's fascinating to me though about this entire conversation is that and I think you were kind of getting to this point at one point here, Archaic, was that like Pokemon Go is a different beast than like the main series games, and leaks are handled a lot differently because in the mobile app world, your like APKs and stuff, they're out there for people to get because they need to be out in the ether, so to speak, in order to be approved by the services that they need to go live on. And so like the live service nature of it has sort of necessitated Nintendo in general, I suppose, just Pokemon Company, to handle their attitude towards that and how people do leaks and leak coverage a little bit differently. And having Niantic as a middleman, I'm sure obfuscates a lot of this from their decision making process. But like, because I completely agree with you about like leaks for main series games where it's like, don't do this sort of thing. It feels a little bit weird. But when these leaks for Pokemon Go have been consistently accurate and things like that, and are seemingly coming from a place of like knowing, almost intimate, a little inside the housey is what people think, right? It's difficult, especially as a content creator who works on the news cycle, to not cover it. We've had a policy, so to speak, in the past of just not covering leaks. We'll mention them every once in a while, but we'll say these are leaks, these might not happen at all. And that the onus to do that has felt less and less over time.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot of, it's not exactly peer pressure, but certainly pressure from the fandom that like, oh, but all these other sites are covering leaks, or all these other sites are doing this, so why don't you? And I mean, for years I've been going, well, like, yeah, sure, that other site may be talking about fan games or whatever, but they've got a whole lot less to lose than Bulba.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a bit of a difference between some other sites starting to cover this and the biggest names. I mean, if we go back to what happened with Black and White, Bulba was the only one of the large sites that did not get, or the large sites at the time, that didn't get a cease and desist notice because we didn't cover the leaks. And that basically cemented in my mind that, like, yeah, we're doing the right thing here. We've made the right decision to not cover this. And like, I've had people going, well, what's the difference between that and, say, like, covering the Koro leaks that you used to do?
Oh,
Koro.
Oh,
Yeah.
those magazine announcements, they were so instrumental in like, oh, what's this? Oh,
Yeah,
there's
they
something
really
so
were.
special about those photos.
And I was always like, the Koro stuff happened because people legitimately got hold of those magazines before release date. And it's a difference between someone, like, the fact they legitimately got hold of them was a big difference to someone who is taking stuff off servers.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I guess that the difference people look at nowadays is probably more, did someone get this stuff off a server that they shouldn't have access to, or is it that they got stuff off like the public eShop server or whatever, and they were just able to decode the data? And I mean, like, my background is in marketing. As a marketer, I'd say, please stop doing either. You're not helping my marketing when you screw up my schedule by releasing this info before I meant to do it. You've just wasted all the work my team have been doing on that trailer that we now can't release in 2 weeks because you've put the info out early.
Yeah, it is sort of like fans cannibalizing the thing that they love to a degree.
There's this insatiable demand that fans always have for knowing as much as they can and just having that little bit of insider knowledge. So if you're not aware, in the Pokemon Go space, Pokemon themselves put on their website the next community days for January and February, and took it down same day. So there's this
within
conversation
like an hour,
of,
not even. Yeah.
Pokemon Company published this information. Is it a leak or is it a whoopsie daisy? So there's that conversation you have to have because it's been put on their website, accessible to everyone. Just not everyone's refreshing the Pokemon website to get the information. But does that become a leak or is that information? So a lot of places in that instance have decided it was put up by Pokemon Company, then retracted. So we just provide the fact that it has been retracted so it could change.
So let me give an example there related to Scarlet Violet from just the past week. So before Indigo Disc went up, the patch notes went up on the website for the Poker Portal News. But they weren't on the listing page. So you had to know what the URL was for the previous news and then increment the numbers until you got to the next actual news that they were going to publish later that day. So it hadn't actually been formally published, even though it was publicly accessible on the web if you figured out the URL. And in that circumstance, do you wait to publish until they've actually announced, or do you publish it immediately? And there's a lot of Pokemon stuff that happens that's like that, where it's on the web because they're prepping the website, but they haven't added the links yet. You can't find it via search engines, and it's just people finding it because they're putting in page URLs that they think might work until they hit something.
Yeah, they know the potholes to shine the flashlight into. Like they know where to look, and not everybody's looking there because they're not supposed to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, and I feel like it sort of kind of falls back on what you were talking about, where it's like context matters, and it's like sort of case by case to a degree, right? So choosing to not cover the black and white stuff was right in that one other particular case. But how often? Okay, so you gave us an example of where you thought you made the right decision, right? Was there a time where you're like, I wish we had covered this and we didn't because we thought we might get in trouble for it, and as a result, we kind of fell behind the curve? That might be an unfair question. Feel free to pass.
Yeah, I'm just hope. I knew Xerneas's type before that was announced.
Ooh, okay.
I knew details of fairy type early. We did some kind of hinting towards it. We never gave the actual name. Actually, I don't think I had the actual name. I just had certain info about it. But we had that info. We hinted towards it. I mean, we gave a completely fake type name as well to
nice
kind of like what did we do it we did this as we put it up on the Facebook and a few other places. We were like, speculating about new types and like love type and sound type and
sound. Every time you talk about a new type, it's like audio sound
should be a type.
I mean, it's been claimed by normal at this point. You're not going to be able to extract it.
Well, so was fairy.
But yeah, no. The advantage fairy had was that it was much clearer how you take certain Pokemon of other types and incorporate them into the fairy type, whereas pretty much all the possible sound types are normal, so it's not quite the same.
True. Boomburst.
So, for context, for your sake, Archaic, so Boomburst is a really good move in the main series, but because of how type effectiveness is handled in Pokemon Go, there are not immunities, there are just super resistances. So a Pokemon like Noivern having Boomburst, which doesn't get stabbed from, is, less efficient. And then we had a update where they brought Boomburst to basically every other Pokemon that could learn it except Swallow and Chatot. And that was about all that entire 3-month update was. So the PvP community was so upset, nothing else changed except Boomburst got given to more Pokemon.
It is my favorite Pokemon Go community meme of all time. I will say that with confidence now. The Boomburst thing is hilarious. Anyway, sound type should exist. I understand it's a normal, but maybe we could get rid of normal or something like that. But that's a conversation.
I will say, we are... The only thing that would make a new type plausible at this time would be regional forms, because you would have to add so many Pokemon of the new type within a single generation to make it viable and not make it feel like ghost types and dragon types back in Generation 1.
Yeah.
So it's possible thanks to regional forms, but you're still potentially having to add like a huge number of new Pokemon plus a huge number of regional forms that are all that one type within a single generation, to the point where you'd probably get no new Pokemon that didn't have that type as at least one of their types.
I remember when they announced Fairy type, and I think it was Gardevoir was one of the key Pokemon that they said would be getting the Fairy type among a couple others in that release. And I'm like, so I looked at the Fairy type egg group, and I'm like, what else could get it? What else could get it? I'm like, Pikachu! Imagine.
I mean, honestly, a regional Pikachu that has Fairy type, I've heard stupider ideas.
Look, I'd be down for it.
That makes a lot of sense. In fact, I think there hasn't been a Fairy typed Pikachu in the TCG back in the day. I'd have to double check.
Oh, I would imagine. I would imagine that card exists.
And I think with the current format in the TCG with the Terra types, they're having a lot more fun and flexibility with what types they're putting on the cards. So
Terra types in the TCG is just a rejigging of the good old Holon Delta Pokemon from back in the day. I do love it that this current EX era is basically bringing back all the stuff that was in the game when I used to be playing it back in the day.
Yeah,
I remember my Delta Fire Charizard and just loving it. I had no reason for understanding why it was there. It was just a card I had. And just loving that I had a Fire type Fire type Rayquaza. My apologies. Oh, that was a Freudian slip.
No, I was just loving the fact that back then I could play Japanese cards, so I had I bought the Gardevoir Delta theme deck from Japan, so I got 2 Fire-type Gardevoir Delta EX, which would have been very difficult to get over here at the time, but guaranteed in the theme deck, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the TCG is a wild space. Every time that I go to a competitive event or watch coverage of it, my eyes used to glaze over. But the more you watch, the more I've begun to appreciate it. Yeah, that's out of pocket.
So we sort of lightly dipped our toes into the next topic when talking about Fairy type regional variant of Pikachu. But, Archaic, pretend you've been given the clef keys to the city, and TPC comes to you and says, we would like you to design or pitch a new Pokemon regional variant, Pokemon family. What would be the first thing that you would like to see them do? It could be anything from a new evolution, a baby, a divergent evolution, whatever.
A costume, yeah, anything.
I would like to see them introduce something that would give them an excuse to add more game mechanics besides battling back to the main series games. Whether that be contests, whether it be contests and other things, like just something that, like a lot of the promise of Scarlet and Violet initially was that like, oh, play how you want. You've got different paths you can go down. It's like, yeah, that was a bit of an illusion of choice.
Yeah.
But
every time I think of having to do the Team Star path, and because my starter was Quaxley, and so Quackquavel was the one I was charging off with the auto battles, and just hearing the quack quack. So anytime someone brings up choose your path, I just hear Quackquavel's cry running off as a flamingo dances away.
Also, can we just sort of like take a moment to appreciate that them knowing that Pokemon players are just rabid completionists. They're like, here's an open world game, choose a path. We're like, yeah, you mean all of them? Nice. All right. Yeah.
Well, actually, on that point, like, so I don't think this is too much of a spoiler. One of the elite challenges in the Indigo Disc requires you to put together a team of Pokemon that you have caught there in the terrarium in the Indigo Disc yourself.
Have you done that challenge yet?
No, that's where I stopped my Twitch stream on launch day, and now I'm slowly training a team up because I felt called out by them going, oh, you couldn't just use your team. And I'm like, Maybe I would. Maybe I want to stick with my team of favorites.
So that
Right.
was the first one I went up to when I hit the Indio disc. So I thought all of them would do
Me
something
too.
similar.
Uh,
So I just ran up to the mountain and said, right, what did this guy say his specialty was? And I'm not going to, because if you haven't done it, I'm not going to reveal what the trainers have. I'm like, right, what was this person's specialty? Okay, they said they're dragon type. And I look up and there's a Duraludon, and I'm like, right, you're coming with me. And then
Put your
I'm
arm
running
it.
around.
Come on, bud. Yeah,
And I'm running around like,
yeah.
where's my Eviolite? Put that on Duraludon. Right. Oh, there's an Excadrill. Let's grab that. We'll do a sand team. Perfect.
So, Archaic, what were you going to say about that approach? Did you like it, or like, I guess that concept? Is that
I mean,
appeal to
in
you?
terms of like Pokemon fans being completionists, I think they're actually highlighting that I don't think a lot of fans necessarily are. I think a lot of people grab their favorites and have a team of 6 and then probably just play with that team. I suspect the actual proportion of people who ever complete their decks is very small, and I suspect, well, I'd imagine that from in-game analytics and stuff that would be sent back to Pokemon Company and Game Freak, that they know how small that is, and they're maybe wanting to make people see a bit more of the Pokemon world outside of just the usual favorites. I mean, let's be honest. It gets a bit boring after a while seeing Pikachu, Charizard, Gardevoir, Lucario. What else would you
Eevee?
expect to see? Eevee
Yeah.
and I mean Mewtwo, I guess.
Yeah.
Or,
Gyarados, Snorlax.
Yeah, Snorlax, Gengar. Like anytime there's a Gen 1 merch line released, you can pretty much guarantee it's going to be Pikachu, Snorlax, Gengar, the starters, and that's probably it.
Dragonite on occasion.
Dragonite on occasion.
Although weirdly, they don't seem to use Dragonite as much as they probably could from a marketing perspective, and I'm a little happy about that.
Have you seen the stuff from Fendi that's coming out, the bags and things like that?
The Dragonite satchel?
Oh yeah. Anyway, we're
that's a side tangent. But,
yeah.
So I mean, back to your question. I mean, like, I guess it's not a Pokemon design, but more a
Pokemon game
design that I want to. Like, I miss having lots of Pokemon spin-offs, and I have felt for a number of years now that the main series games are coming out too fast. Like, I prefer now where we've got DLC to give us a bit of a buffer. But if we now get a brand new main series game announced in February and then released next November, like, I'd just be like, please, guys, give us a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
so games like Detective Pikachu 2 would have had more breathing room if it didn't come out so close to the first DLC expansion for Scarlet Violet, for example.
I think you mean Detective Pikachu Returns.
Something.
But like, you look at what happened with Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, and Legends Arceus. But they came out far too close to each other, and like Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, probably. I mean, frankly, if Game Freak had shoved a bit of their staff towards it to help give it the additional polish and to make it so it's not as much of a faithful remake and ended up being more of an Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, that would have been nicer. And then let Legends be pushed another 6 months to a year, and then let Scarlet and Violet be pushed another 6 months to a year. Frankly, that would have been nicer. I mean, I'm hoping we don't get another full-on, like, paired release announced Pokemon Day next year. I will take a Legends game being announced.
So, talking Legends, if you were to pick a Pokemon whose lore you'd like them to expand upon, what would you want the focus Pokemon to be in? What region, past, present, or future, would you want it to take place in, of the known regions?
Ooh. I mean, I think everyone's predicting Unova will be the next Legends. And I mean, I haven't finished Indigo Disc yet, but there were a few things in that already made me think, oh,
Well, the
okay.
Blueberry Academy is based in the Unova region.
It is based in the Unova
Yeah.
region. You get there via subway.
The
and,
implication with Lacey as well.
Yeah.
Clay's
Clay's daughter.
Yep.
Yes. Plane into a subway, which I really want to see that transition from the airport to the underwater subway.
It's like the Barbie movie. You just have wipeaways.
But yeah, I like Unova being the next Legends seems reasonable to me. If there was something I'd like more lore explanation on, I think it would probably be delving even deeper into the lore of Ultra Beasts and the canonical multiversal stuff that they've got going.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah, it's such untapped potential, and you're like, oh, they're leaving this vague because they're going to capitalize this in the future. And just like every other kind of gimmick, you're just like moved on. You're like, no, wait a minute, go back.
And I mean, honestly, that's been a problem with Pokemon for a long time, that they introduce a gimmick and then they move on from it, and that it's all basically completely gone, rarely referred to again. And it's like, guys, why don't we have contest halls anymore?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why don't we have new Ranger games? Why have you not gotten together with Koei Tecmo and given us Pokemon Musou already?
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, Pokemon Conquest was amazing.
I never got to play it. I would love for another one to come out.
My brain went straight back to the love of Hyrule Warriors. So I've put probably close to 1,000 hours into the Wii U version and into the 3DS version and into the Switch version. So
yeah, and I mean, like playing that synchro thing in Indigo Disc is the closest we're going to get to Pokemon Warriors at this rate.
Yeah.
But like, I'd like to see more of these spin-offs, because I think the Pokemon franchise is much bigger than just the existing core games. I think the failure from some hardcore fans to recognize that, including with things like the original launch of Pokemon Go, it diminishes the franchise to make it be all about those solitary core RPGs, and we're missing so much more of the experience. Like, I loved Legends because it felt like I was actually getting to know some of these characters, and we actually had a plot. Yes, please, I want more Pokemon games you can play for the plot.
You had a twist that everybody universally in the fandom was like, whoa. You know, that entire
Paris is evil.
The ending of that game is nuts. It is nuts. And I feel like the turn at the end of PSV base is also really, really good. But I think Legends takes the cake.
And if we were to do a Legends style game, personally, I'd love to see them explore the lore around Magana, and potentially set it in a historic Kalos around the time of the war. And I think that would be a really interesting thing to see, and sort of AZ as a character, but you see a younger AZ. And I think that would be really interesting for a Legends type experience.
That'd be a good excuse to have a new kind of Pokemon Conquest sort of thing, without using like the Samurai Warriors characters or whatever, and actually using original characters for it.
Like Hisuian Typhlosion and Hisuian Decidueye. And then Samurai,
I wonder if you could hook that into the new Horizons anime and like some of the stuff we're seeing there.
Well, look, Celebi travels in time, Dialga travels in time. We're due for another Pokemon that can travel in time.
Don't forget about Hoopa, portals, whatever, rings, you know.
Oh, Legends Hoopa. And you start out with like the imp, and the plot is the Djinn form trying to take over. Oh, that would be so cool.
No, what we gotta do is we gotta have a Legends Zygarde game, and it's just like Spore. You start as one Zygarde cell, and you work your way up through the game, and it's just completely just a grand departure from the regular game design. That'd be great. Well, I think you've given us two relatively in-depth answers to our questions, so thank you very much. That qualifies as far as we're concerned. But we also have this last opportunity for our guests to present their question to us to discuss. So do you have one for us?
I mean, I think we've maybe already had that answered in terms of
Yeah.
your responses to what I was saying, but I guess I would have asked, like, if you could have a Pokemon game in any game genre that you could, what kind of game genre would you want a Pokemon game in?
Oh man,
I'll go first.
Easy answer.
I'd love a kart racer.
Oh,
We
yeah,
already
okay.
had one. It was Pokemon Dash, and it was horrible.
No, but like with Rev-a-Vroom. Everyone has the Rev-a-Vrooms.
Well, okay. So these would be human trainers on the Pokemon, and you'd have like someone riding a Go-Goat and someone riding a
Rapidash. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
like that one anime episode where that dude was on that electrode and just running on top of the electrode.
But I'd love the Pokemon company to work with the Mario Kart team, so it has that level of polish, and it's from Nintendo in-house, so it has the highest level of standards to work on their hardware. I think that would be incredible. They
did finish the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe DLC, they do have something they need to work on, so...
We have no reason to believe it's not Mario Kart 9, but if we did... I think my answer, and I would have said MOBA if Unite wasn't out, and it took us a while to get there, but Unite is pretty awesome. But easy answer, and this sort of feels like a cop-out, but I want a full-fledged, thorough, deep MMO. I really, really do. I want that in my bones. That's
been the dream since the old days, hasn't it?
Yes, it absolutely has, and I'm still holding on to it. So happy to say.
I think the only problem with the MMO idea comes down to moderation, because you have to know that, like, there's no way they'd let you speak with anything except canned phrases, and I suspect it's just not going to give people.
I'm using tilt controls.
Exactly.
Yeah, I feel like they have a couple of subsystems down for that. They have stuff for in raids, with your whatever, like the emotes and Unite, they have some of those phrases too. Like, yeah, it could be done.
Yeah, I'm going north.
You are Garbodor. See, I think that'd be great if they sort of like made Pokemon versions of some of these phrases so they like hit less more squarely, I suppose. Well, great. Yeah. Well, anyway, listen, thanks so much, Archaic, for spending time with us. It's been great getting to know you a little bit. And really just, I guess, the tip of the iceberg as far as the interesting story and fascinating background of Bulbagarden, and at large, just sort of like the sort of like fandom space and where people live on the internet in interests like this. I'm sure we could probably talk for several more hours, but thank you for the time you've given us today. All right. And you said that there was a Twitch channel too. So what's the slash for that one? Is it Bulbagarden?
Yeah, Bulbagarden. You can find us on Twitch, Discord, X, formerly known as Twitter, Mastodon, Tumblr, pretty much most social networks you're on. We've probably got a Bulbagarden account somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure we're on that one yet, actually, but you can follow Mastodon accounts from Threads, so just follow the Mastodon account.
There you go.
There you go.
I will be doing my due diligence and putting all these links in the show notes. So if you missed one of those, dear listener, feel free to go take a look there and follow on your desired platforms and things like that. Archaic, anything else you'd like to say before we wish you a goodbye?
I don't know. This old trainer yelling at Altaria has been around a long time. The one thing about the Pokemon fandom is that it is diverse. There are spaces for all sorts of different people in this fandom, and all of us are going to enjoy Pokemon in different ways. So, look, I mean, I don't play much of Pokemon Go. I'll fully admit that. In fact, I can't remember the last time I actually did play it. But
You're not alone.
Yeah,
You are here, but not in general.
yeah. I mean, that doesn't mean that I don't want to make sure that the Pokemon Go fans don't have a space. I absolutely want to make sure everyone has a space in our community. So, like, if you've got anything you think Bulba could do better or that it isn't doing, if you have ideas of stuff we could do, if you're a small content creator who wants some help getting noticed, whatever, look, we would love to assist you. I think a lot of people probably look at some of the big sites as being like, oh, they're so intimidating. I couldn't possibly contact them, etc., etc. It's like, no, we're just regular fans like you. So feel free to reach out.
Awesome.
And an Australian, so we always mean well, even if we sound like we're talking to a barbecue. We've got your best interests at heart most of the time.
Talking to a blueberry quest.
Oh. So you took the bait. I wasn't sure if someone would.
Yeah, I mean, I thought you were going to say something about how Australians sound like we use expletives as punctuation, which, to be fair,
we do. It's really hard when I'm talking to Chris to not just end every sentence with Quagsire.
I appreciate the candor, gentlemen. Thank you. Okay, well, on that note, thank you again very, very much, Archaic. Thank you, Lachlan. And thank you, dear listener, for listening in. We'll catch you in the next one. Until then, good luck, shiny vibes, all that good stuff. Go check out Bulba Garden, get yourself educated on more Pokemon stuff, and get involved in the community in a nice, safe, and foundationally supportive place. So we'll catch you later. Bye-bye.
See you around, everyone.